Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for standing by. Welcome to the webinar today, brought to you by ComplyRight, 5 Performance Management Scenarios, Navigating Everyday Encounters for Greater Results. Please note that during the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Tuesday, May 10th, 2016. My name is Stephanie Thomas, and I am your host today. Thank you, everyone, for attending this webinar, and welcome. I'd like to review a few housekeeping items before we begin. If you would like to ask a question, simply use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. You can ask questions at any time. If you have any audio trouble, please message us in the chat box and we will assist you. Please ensure your speakers are turned on with the volume up. Now, I am pleased to introduce you to our speaker today, Mike Haberman. You're in for a real treat, as Mike is the Vice President and co-founder of Omega HR Solutions, Inc., an Atlanta-based HR consulting and services company, and he has over 35 years of experience. He has a broad background in HR compliance, including hiring, interviewing, employee relations, management training, outplacement, and safety. Additionally, he is the leading HR blogger, is featured in the online version of Human Resources Executive Magazine, and his blog name is HR Observations if you want to check it out. And without further ado, here's Mike. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Stephanie, and welcome and thank everyone for attending today's webinar. Today we're going to talk about performance management, a subject that is always on the top of the news of human resources today and in management magazines. It's a loaded term. Performance is about your employees' behavior and their actions in the workplace. And management is how you, as leaders and supervisors, shape that behavior and actions. So what we're going to do is we're going to put them together, and we'll end up with an essential component of any successful organization that is dependent on getting the highest value out of each and every employee. Now, occasionally, we're not always perfect people, and we have shortcomings, and most of the employees have shortcomings and supervisors have shortcomings. So how can we address those and boost results at the same time? And that's the topic of today's presentation. We're going to look at 5 real-world scenarios and what you can do with them to enhance the outcomes. Whether you're a new supervisor or a seasoned manager, I'm going to share some practical guidance on how to navigate the highs and the lows of employee performance. And I hope you'll walk away with a better sense of what to say and do in some of the toughest personal situations. So stick with me, and you're going to learn counseling techniques to improve behavior and output, how to balance positive and negative feedback and review time, coaching and mentoring tips to help motivate employees, conflict resolution tactics for when tempers interfere with team performance, and how to terminate employees fairly and legally when everything else fails. Because when the bottom line is you've got to do it right to save both the company time, effort, and money, and also to treat the employee the best. So first of all, let's take a quick poll. And since I've mentioned that this presentation is going to benefit everyone from new supervisors to seasoned supervisors, I'd like to see where you fall in that spectrum. So if we can do the poll and give everybody an opportunity to give me an idea of what their background is. All right, let's see here. What we're looking at here is we've got a fair number of people who have less than a year, a good number of people in that 1 to 5 years, and a super number of people that have done this 11 years or more. So very across the board right here. And if you're a new manager, we're going to teach you some new basics, which will give you some confidence in handling those situations. And for you experienced managers, there may be some things that you might have to reprogram and get rid of some bad habits, such as not having an open door policy, forgetting to share feedback, ignoring some difficult situations, and letting them fester, which is easy to do. And hopefully you'll get brushed up on some best practices that will make you a more effective manager. So now that I have an idea of where everybody stands, let's get into our first scenario here. This first scenario is about counseling employees to improve their behavior and their output. And the example that we have here is, I want you to meet Michelle. Michelle is a project manager for a busy department in your company. For 3 years, she has been consistently reliable. She works very hard, does her job very well. Her attention to detail is top-notch, and it serves her very well in that position as a project manager. But lately, she's been slipping. She missed important deadlines on several projects. Over the past couple of days, other employees have told you confidentially that she's not tracking jobs or following up on the deliverables as usual. One even implied that perhaps she's having personal issues. And you may be hoping that this is just a blip in her performance, but it looks like it might be more than that. So what's happening here, and what can you do about it? Well, first, you need to be aware that any employee's performance can slide. Sometimes it's gradual. Sometimes it's sudden. Michelle's has been a little bit more gradual as opposed to sudden. But what are you going to do about this subpar performance? Well, the first thing is the don'ts. You don't ignore the situation and hope it will go away. In all likelihood, it's not going to, and the problems will only escalate. Don't commiserate or speculate with other employees. This is particularly true for you newer supervisors. This is a trap that inexperienced people fall into, and it can erode the trust and morale that you have in your organization. And it can even potentially get you in legal trouble depending upon the nature of things that are said. Don't jump directly to disciplinary action. The employee has a track record of good performance, and you need to give her the opportunity to correct herself. So the do's that you want to do is address the situation quickly and directly with the employee. Find out from them what's going on before you decide on any action. You need to understand the why of what has been happening. And then once you find out, you need to follow up and have a plan for doing that follow-up. So we've established that this situation calls for a little private counseling. Michelle's not doing what she's supposed to do, and you've got notifications from other people that what you've seen is not the only problem. So what do you need to do? You need to schedule a private meeting with her. Explain to her what you've noticed and that you are concerned about her performance, particularly given what her track record has been. You need to stick to the facts and share examples of what you have noticed, and such as missed deadlines, sloppy work, uncompleted work, those kinds of things. You need to have those facts prepared before you sit down with her. You need to give the employee an opportunity to explain her side of her performance problems. And we highlighted this one bullet point here that says, listen carefully to identify the root cause. That is particularly important because there may be things going on in the initial answers that she gives you will not identify for you what the actual problem is. A very key question to ask when she starts talking about this is, and she gives you an explanation, is then say, and what else? And keep saying, and what else? Until she says there is nothing else. That's giving you the opportunity to get to that root cause. There are a number of books on coaching that many of them explain to you that for you to be able to get at a performance problem, you need to get at what that root cause is. Now, the root cause may, in this case, be problems at home, health problems. It may be problems with coworkers, and we'll talk a little bit about some of those in the next coming slide. So you've got to be aware of those, but that's also one of the areas that you can get caught up in some legal problems. You have to listen very carefully to that attention. You want to stay professional, but you want to be compassionate at the same time. Now, compassionate, for some of you that may seem like a squishy characteristic. If you don't like the word compassionate, substitute be respectful. Everybody wants to be respected in their job, in their life, in their workplace. In fact, what's one of the most frequent complaints you hear about violence is the fact that I wasn't respected. People disrespected me. So you need to make sure that you're exercising this compassion by being respectful and staying professional. And then from that, at the end of that conversation is determine a plan of action. What is Michelle going to do to correct the performance problems that she has? And if it is something outside of work, then you need to involve what she can do on her own at home to make the situation better. A favorite example of mine on getting at the root cause is an employee who has an attendance problem, and you start talking to them and say, well, why were you late today? And the employee answers, well, my alarm clock broke. And you go, and what else? And he says, well, it's just my alarm clock is broken. Why haven't you replaced the alarm clock? Well, because I haven't been able to get to the store because my car is broken. Or, any things like that. Keep questioning at that and get at what their root cause is, and then come up with, in that particular example, the plan of action is to buy another alarm clock or to set your smartphone to set off that alarm. So here we're talking about the root causes here. As I said, a lot of times your counseling session will reveal that it is not just a problem with the work, it could be a problem with something else. So they may have problems at home. And you don't have to be put in the position of being the company psychologist. In fact, you're probably better off not being the company psychologist. So what you can do is offer to them an EAP if you have one available, or even to just suggest that they look for counseling solutions. If the problems at home are caused by the fact that the employee is having to work extraordinary hours, then perhaps you can reduce the workplace stress for them that will make their home life a little bit better. Perhaps this root cause for this performance problems is conflict with another team member. Well, find out what that conflict is. And again, asking the question, and what else? Because they may give you an answer that is just a surface answer and not the true answer. Find out what is causing that conflict, and then try to address that and resolve that. Perhaps the root cause is boredom. They're just tired of their job. If you've ever been in a position where you're tired of doing that particular job, it just doesn't amp you up anymore, and you need a new challenge, and you've been in that position. You understand an employee who needs that additional challenge. So take a look at what you can do in their job to provide them with a new assignment, a new challenge. It might take a redefinition of role. It might take delegating some of the routine tasks that they do to someone else. So to eliminate that boredom. Or it could be that the employee feels undervalued. And there may, we always talk about employee engagement and how people need to feel respected, how people need to feel happy, how people need to feel valued, and that all increases employee engagement. Well, those are some of the things that you can take a look at. And what are your management techniques? Why is this person not feeling valued by you or other members of the management team? It may be that one of the reasons they're undervalued is they're not making enough money. And perhaps that is a clue that the organization needs to take a look at the compensation plan. So you might suggest that to somebody. So getting at that root cause is critically important for you to truly understand what the problem is. The bottom line, though, is, again, show that compassion. And, like I said, if that's too squishy for you, turn that word into show respect. But be professional about it. Be clear that their performance must improve regardless of what the root cause is. Tell them that despite all of that that's going on, they still have an obligation to produce good quality work on time, in completeness, in meeting the requirements of the of the job description and the parameters that have been set out. If you need to change parameters, set new parameters around those things that need to be changed. If new goals need to be set, new aspects of the job need to be defined, you can set those parameters there. Establish a reasonable time frame for that resolution, and then monitor that and follow up according to that plan that you set up. One of the worst things you can do is set up a plan with an employee when you're trying to correct their behavior and then you don't follow up. So the follow-up is absolutely critical for you. Now there's a lot that I'm presenting on these slides, and you will be mailed these slides later in the week along with some other items that you're going to get. But the bottom line of this is documentation is your friend. When you're setting up a plan and you're setting up a way to monitor that, you need to have that plan documented. A friend of mine who's an attorney once told me that she would like to have 1 page of documentation she'd take that over 10,000 words of testimony when she's trying to defend her clients in court. Well, that documentation has to begin in your actions. You have to keep thorough notes on all the performance issues and discussions. As a consultant, I have been doing this since 1991, and one of the most frequent mistakes I find that managers do is the fact that they do not do appropriate documentation. They get to the point, as we'll talk about in the end, of trying to terminate somebody, and they do not have the rhyme nor reason of why they want to do that. And if you're not doing the documentation thoroughly all the time, you're going to fall down. And I know supervisors and managers hate to hear the word documentation, but it's absolutely necessary to correct performance and then to defend yourself if actions come from the course of actions come from the fact that you end up terminating this employee. So record events as they occur. After you've jotted down some notes, then sit down and flesh those notes out, make them more detailed, and then consider using a performance management journal to take those notes. Now, Comply Right does offers a supervisor's journal. You'll get information about that in the email that you get along with these slides. You might want to take a look at that. But it can be done anyway. It can be done on a smartphone. It can be done on a tablet. It can be done on a pocket notebook. It can be done on a piece of paper. The point is to get it in writing. There's an old saying that says the palest ink is stronger than the strongest memory. And if you don't have it in there, when you have to go back at some point and recreate these scenarios, these discussions that you're having with the employees, then you are going to be lost if you don't have that documentation. And trying to remember conversations from 2 and 3 and 4 years ago when you're now in a trial is going to be difficult. So you need to have that documentation. So let's take a look at our next scenario here about providing fair and balanced feedback. It's annual review time, and you've just delivered a review to Mark. In it, you've given him an average rating for meeting his goals and addressed a couple of performance issues that you observed in recent weeks. You call him out for it, you call him out for not contributing ideas in the monthly department meetings and for missing an important deadline. At the end of the review, Mark sits there and you can tell that he is upset. When you ask him why, he said the review was unfair. Have you ever heard that before? You didn't give him any credit for the things he did accomplish, and you brought up things that he didn't even know were a problem. And the deadline was missed because he thought another project was more important. And he refuses to assign the review. What went wrong here? What do you think? What do you do next? It is, and in that scenario right there, there were some mistakes in there. And are those Mark's mistakes, or perhaps those your mistakes as a supervisor? So it is very helpful when you're doing these reviews that you have a history that you can go on. And in this particular case, everything that you told Mark in this may be true. But that doesn't mean it was fair, because there were some things that you as the supervisor may have missed in doing that performance review. So one of the things you want to make sure is that you want to make sure that you're setting clear goals and expectations for your employees. In this particular case, remember we talked about the fact that Mark thought there was a different priority on the one project, which you then hit him for. Well, that goal and that expectation should be set, and not just at the beginning of the year. Goals and expectations should be reviewed on a periodic basis to make sure that people are on track. There is nothing worse as an employee than having to go an entire year working on what you've been working on, only to be told at the end of the year that you didn't meet that expectation because something else was more important. And in this particular case, Mark thought something else was more important. He didn't realize he needed to stay with that priority. So make sure you are clarifying priorities for your employees along the way. Management is not just a once a day or one day event on an annual basis. It is an ongoing exercise of making sure that your employees are working on their goals, they're meeting their expectations, that they understand what they are supposed to be doing. And that's what staying plugged into what your employee is doing comes in, is the fact that if you want to have a balanced view, you've got to take a look at what they're doing. You have to keep notes on the good things as well as the bad things that they do. And that's where that performance journal that I mentioned comes in. Make those notes, or make those notes on anything that you want to keep them on. Now, I've run in, when I've made that suggestion to supervisors and managers, many of them say, well, the good stuff is what those employees are supposed to be doing. That's what they're getting paid for. Yeah, that is true. You are paying them to produce quality work and have good performance. But it helps if you note that performance and you hear things good. You hear a compliment. You get a letter from a customer that notes the great conversation that they'd had with your customer service rep. Whatever those good things are, you hear other employees compliment, or another manager compliments an employee. Those are the things that need to be noted to balance out the things that may not be so good. So keep those notes. Also, when you hear about good things, or when you hear about poor things, address them, and address them at that time, and make sure that you are then correcting the situation, or you are giving praise for the work that was done. And then, keep performance discussions in perspective. There should never, never, never be an issue raised at a performance appraisal that you have never talked about before. There should be no surprises at a review time. In fact, review times are, to me, just that. They're a review. They are talking about what has happened, what are the successes, what are the downfalls, and there should never be anything new introduced into that discussion unless it happened as they were walking through your door. And that's typically not going to happen. So you want to make sure that they're getting constructive feedback, and They will appreciate that as long as they believe you're being fair. One of the most common complaint about performance evaluations is the fact that they are subjective, or at least they are perceived as being subjective. The more information you have, the more check-ins that you've done, the more documentation you have, the more you get away from that subjective impression that employees may have. And as long as you're doing it well and they have confidence that you are not being subjective, people will, will take that critique. Well, they will take that criticism and adapt to it and be a better employee for it. So, if you're going to do an annual review, and that's one of the things that is rapidly changing in the world, some of you may have heard about bigger companies getting rid of performance evaluations in the annual reviews. And what they're doing is actually just changing from a single review to multiple reviews through the year. Whether you do it once a month, once a quarter, or once a year, these points right here are important for you to understand. Before you sit down and talk to an employee, review your notes. Make sure that you totally understand what needs to be said and what needs to be done, that you understand the positives and you understand the negatives, and that you are going to be prepared to give credit where due is due, and a lot, the blame where blame is necessary. It helps if your organization has a standard appraisal format. There are a lot of them out there. Some people create their own. You should have one that the employee is familiar with, may have used at a different department. Just that standardization helps. Comply Right, again, offers a couple of different appraisal form options, and you will get information for that later in that email when you get the PowerPoint slides. When you're sitting down to do a review with somebody, there's anxiety. There's anxiety on your part. There's anxiety on their part. In my experience as a consultant and human resources professional, I have found that managers hate to do a number of things. One is they hate to hire people, they hate to fire people, and they hate doing performance evaluations, because every one of those three things is a public judgment of what we think of that particular person. And so it makes it difficult. So there's going to be some anxiety on your part. And certainly for the employee sitting there, even if you've been a fantastic employee, most people have self-doubt. And there's going to be some anxiety about, oh man, what are they going to say about this, or what are they going to say about that? And then the other thing that goes into that, depending upon what your situation is, that there may be some money tied up into this. So there's always, always, always anxiety at the start of a performance review. So what you want to do is to make that relaxed a little bit more and talk about the positive things that you have seen. Reinforce that employee's strengths and what contributions they have made, so that they start feeling better about themselves. That will open it up and make it a little bit easier for you to now have a conversation about the areas that they need to improve on. I would stay away from calling them weaknesses. I would call them areas for improvement, and just accentuate the positive. Build on their strengths as opposed to tearing down their weaknesses. When you get to those concerns, make sure that you are direct and make sure that you are clarifying your expectations in writing. Discuss the appropriate time frame for resolution. And then this next bullet point is one that I have always thought was extremely important, is make this a conversation. Employees do not want to hear a monologue. They want to have a dialogue. They want to be able to ask some questions. They want to be able to respond to comments. You've got to be very open to that. You've got to, and use the question, why? Why did you do this? What else do you need? What do I need to help you with for you to be able to improve your performance? What tools do I need to offer you? What support do I need to offer you? So make it a two-way conversation. And in fact, one of the things that you can do to make it conversational is don't do it across your desk. Go to a table someplace where you can sit at a corner and the other employee can sit at a corner, and that makes it more of a conversation. Even if you do it across a table, the table takes away some of the gravitas associated with that desk and makes it seem more conversational as opposed to the monologue from the boss. And then, again, what do they want to do? What are their ambitions? What are their interests? And get them to stretch and talk to you a little bit. I want to share an engagement study with you that was recently done by Gallup, where they were asked to focus on the questions: my supervisor focuses on my strengths or positive characteristics, or my supervisor's focuses on my weakness or my negative characteristics. So what we'll do is we see that out of that poll, 37% said my supervisor focuses on my strengths. And as you can see, as a result of those, 61% of those people feel engaged, and only 1% are actively disengaged. Of the 11% that said my supervisor focuses on my weaknesses, as you can see, the engagement numbers have gone way down, and the actively disengaged numbers have gone way up. But one interesting thing out of this poll, and one question that we didn't ask is, what about if you felt ignored? And 25% of people felt ignored. Only 2% of those people were engaged, and 40% were actively disengaged. And the fact that it's, from that we see that ignoring employees is far worse than you sitting there and highlighting the areas that they need for improvement. What it tells you is that employees would much rather get any feedback at all. So don't be afraid to provide that constructive critique when it's warranted, but make sure it is fair and balanced in the process that you're doing that. Again, you're trying to stay away from the subjective. So if you've got numbers and documents and time frames to back up what you're saying, then providing that feedback will be help you with the engagement of your employees and should make them better employees. So let's go on to our third encounter here, and we're going to stick with the engagement theme a little bit. But let's take a quick poll. How many of you have felt disengaged at work? So we'll do this poll right now and see where we're at. Let's skip here to the results, see what we've got. Wow, look at that. Almost 85%, 83% right now of you have felt disengaged at work. Now, if that's you in the positions that you have, just think what your employees may be like. Just think of the waste that's going on in the workplace from people who are not engaged in what they're doing and in the workplace. I don't know about you, but I think that is kind of eye-opening and should be alarming at the same time. If you all are feeling that way, you can pretty much figure that your employees are probably feeling that way as well. So that should be shocking to you. So in our scenario here, what we have is we have Susan, who has worked in the operations department for nearly 15 years. For the past 8 years, she has operated special machinery used to make custom products for the customers. She was very good at it, and she takes great pride in the finished work that she does. But now, business has changed. Companies recently decided to discontinue those customized products because they're not profitable anymore. But rather than laying Susan off, you offer Susan a job in the warehouse where she'll be picking and packing products for shipment, certainly still takes quality work. And she accepts it, but a month later, she's not cutting it. She's very slow, she can't meet daily order targets, and she doesn't appear to be making an effort to improve. So what's going on here? Can Susan be saved? Well, the answer is maybe. There's a good human resource answer for you. Maybe. As a loyal employee, she has contributed a ton in the past. She certainly deserves the opportunity to turn around. So, because even dedicated long-term employees need some extra attention and support during periods of change. Change is very, very difficult for a lot of people. Reorganization is very difficult for a lot of people. Many of you may have been caught up in something similar to that. You realize that just the process of change disrupts things and makes people feel uncomfortable. And if it's a reorganization and results in a new role for you, and it makes you feel uncomfortable, you can imagine that it may make your employees feel uncomfortable as well. And it triggers disengagement. And it may then trigger on your part a call for some coaching and some mentoring. So here are a couple questions that you need to ask yourself and ask about the situation. Does she understand why the change was made? Had you explained what the business reasons were behind the fact that you were eliminating her job? And did you explain that in the process of trying to transfer her to another one, it was because you did value her as an employee? You need to ask the question, does she have the essential skills for the job? Maybe she's not comfortable using a computer to print orders, or she feels inadequate in doing that job. Perhaps you can set some time aside to train her for that job, or have somebody train her for the job, or even potentially pay for a computer course at a local community college where she can feel more comfortable in whatever skill it is that is necessary for her to do that well. Next question is, did she receive proper training on procedures? Quite often what happens when supervisors have come to me and said this person is not performing what they do, one of the first questions I ask them is, did they get the appropriate training? Well, we had her read her manual. We spent one day showing her how to do this. Well, maybe that's not enough training. And maybe that's the reason she's slow. She is unsure about what the steps in the process are. And, and psychically, for someone who's used to doing great work, feeling like a failure every day because she can't meet the daily targets can take a toll on you. I mean, think about back in your past. If you've not been achieving what you have been used to achieving, how do you feel about yourself? How do you feel about the job? So teach her the most efficient way to do the job. And are you checking in with her frequently? Are you making sure that she doesn't feel ignored? Again, what in that survey, ignored decreases engagement considerably. Have you encouraged her to ask for help? Have you made it clear to her that it is okay to say, I don't know how to do this, I need help on doing this, and can I be shown the best way to do this, even after the first day? And does she know that she's on your side? Maybe she's discouraged because she lost her real job. Let her know you understand that if the job isn't the right fit, then maybe you can look for something else someplace else if this job is not going to work out. But certainly encourage you to try to be successful in this particular job. And that will help you all move along. So here are some coaching steps that we can go through, perhaps to help Susan here. Number one, observe and assess her performance. Depending on the job, that might mean you have to watch her in action. It may be looking at productivity reports. It may mean reviewing the actual work produced, or it may be a combination of all of those things. For a proposal writer, for example, it might include reviewing some recent proposals that were written and analyzing the success rate of those proposals being accepted. The second step is you need to analyze and determine how it can get better. Using the example of proposals, you might observe that the proposal was not written clearly or the employee success rate is lower than average. So how can that be improved? What are the steps that may have to go through to be improved. Once you've determined how that is, show the employee how to improve. Modeling the work yourself may be practical. Sometimes it may not be practical. Many of us don't necessarily know how to do the employee's work. So get somebody to that does know how to do that, or work with the employee and figure it out so that you can get them to improve that work. Showing often involves teaching, and perhaps you can get somebody from the outside that can come in and help you do that. In coaching, you also want to inspire the employee to stretch. A big part of coaching is instilling confidence. Let people know you believe in them and they can do the job. You can always say, I know you can handle this task, you need a little bit more practice. Or you can take a cue from Dale Carnegie's techniques, which says, give them a reputation to live up to. Now in practice, you might actually say, you're incredibly talented and capable, and I know you can make the next proposal a winner, or you can tackle this job, you can learn those computer skills, but make them feel good about themselves, but provide them the stretch. And then follow up with praise or correction. And you might need to cycle through these steps a couple of times, but it's always better to try to recover an employee, particularly one who has been successful in the past, as opposed to now suddenly trying to get rid of them and replace them. It's always much more expensive to the organization to replace an employee than it is to try to recover an employee. But let's take a look at now our fourth encounter and what happens when things get ugly. In this scenario, we've got Carl. Carl is our sales manager who supervises a team of 4 sales reps. At a department meeting, he asks for input on an idea he has to offer service contracts on the products they sell. He gets, deer in the headlight response. 2 employees shift in their seats. 1 doodles on his notepad, and the 4th one stares at the clock. You ever been in a meeting like that? I have. Well, when he finally pushes, one of the reps cops an attitude and says, what does it matter what we think? You're just going to do it the way you want anyway. Why are we even here? Now, I don't know about you, but that would stun me. And in our scenario, it stuns Carl. And at the end of the meeting, he asks the employee to come to his office and meet with him. So what now? So before we get into what Carl's solution was to this, let's go through some of the common causes and symptoms for conflict at work. 1, there's poorly defined task or roles, a lack of clarity about who's doing what, where, and when. That creates gaps. Balls get dropped. Sometimes there's some overlap. Sometimes they're stepping on toes. And when those conflicts arise, you end up with employees battling each other, employees battling the manager, and you need to have better definition of who does what. When you have conflicting goals, you've got to try to resolve those conflicts. As an example, your product development department needs more funds to innovate. The finance has been told to watch every expense, and they're being penny pinchers. And the departments are at odds with each other because their goals are in conflict with each other. And you can solve that by establishing an R&D budget that both departments will be happy to work with. It's going to be a negotiation between the two, and it helps then that you have set the priorities in line. Personality clashes, and that's a tough one. You may have an extrovert employee who says what she thinks. You have an introverted employee who is easily to offend. And personality clashes are inevitable in groups of people, but they can be resolved. It just takes sitting down with the two and understanding what their difficulties are, how they can communicate better, and there may be, even if it's terrible conflict, you may end up having to change their assignments so that you can minimize that action. But you're always better off trying to get them to communicate better. And then the last one is, or two actually, the employee's performance affects others. We've all been in situations where conflict is because somebody is not holding up their end of the job. I think all of us have probably had some experience with a fellow employee that's like that, in their work is hurting more than just them. It is hurting the entire group, and subsequently you get conflict out of that. And then the last one is employees don't feel valued. They put up with a lot, but if they consistently feel undervalued, then eventually comes to head. And I suspect that that's what's happened with Carl's employee here, that there may be some value problems that made that one sales rep blow up. So some of the symptoms for that workplace context are a lack of enthusiasm, a lack of participation in meetings, just like we had with the Carl there, and presence of cliques, the gossiping that gets done, information hoarders, that want, people who want to try to protect their position so they're not being open with other people, and then a lot of finger pointing. Those are all the things that point out that you may have some issues in your workplace as far as conflict. What are some of the tactics that we can take to resolve that? One is, it's your job as the manager to be neutral. Even if you're dealing with another team or department, and even if your own feelings are hurt, you have to try to maintain objectivity as much as possible. You need to listen and show respect, and there's that respect word again. Respect is extremely important. Keep asking why several times in a row can get you to that root problem, as I alluded to earlier on that other slide with our first issue that we had. Be respectful and say, don't poo-poo somebody's idea. Don't just say that's ridiculous. It's one of the things that you've got to be able to get beyond. Get the facts from all sides. Understand everybody's point of view. Understand where they're coming from and their what, why, when, where, and how. Separate issues. Don't let issues be lumped together. Conflict can become an avenue for people to bring up all sorts of problems and slights and go back to things that happened the previous year and where they got their feelings hurt. That may not have anything to do with today's issue, so you need to separate those issues out that are causing the conflict. Take charge. Tell those parties you want to resolve the problem and that you expect their help in arriving at a solution. Consider all those options and then focus on the business goals. In the end, each party has goals to achieve. Everybody's goal should be to help the organization get better. If you get bogged down on what happened and who's at fault and trying to shift the focus away, then what you're going to end up with is diminishing those business goals, and the ultimate goal needs to be making the business achieve what it has done. So now let's get back to Carl here. Carl was caught off guard because he hadn't recognized that one of the symptoms of conflict was that lack of participation and the awkwardness in the meeting. So let's see how he handles this. He pulls himself together before meeting with the employee. He then listens to the employee and hears complaints about everything from the new travel policy to a memo he sent 6 months ago about increased sales quotas. Which sales rep hasn't ever complained about increased sales quotas? But by focusing on what's happened in the actual meeting and asking lots of questions, he realizes that he did have a habit of making unilateral decisions, and that he did have a habit of making his employees feel undervalued. He was a part of the conflict that was there. So the next time Carl meets with his team, he promises to take their input more seriously. He invites his team to call him out if he goes back to his old behavior. And then he explains that the goal is to find new revenue sources because sales are flagging. So he wants the team's contribution on how they're going to do that. They express some concerns about rolling out service contracts without testing the idea. So they agree to test it on their best product first. And then from that point, Carl asks the team to recommend pricing. He's getting their buy-in to this process. And With that, would you then be surprised to hear the next team meeting resulted in 3 new product ideas? Carl handled it well. So the manager in this, Carl, was one of the parties in conflict, even though he didn't know it. And when he applied these tactics, he is able to not only to resolve the conflict, but fix himself, and with that he was able to remain objective and showed respect to the employees. He took charge of the situation by acknowledging his role, committing to change, and you all can do the same thing as well. So let's take a look at our 5th scenario here where you've got to fire somebody. And with that, our final poll here is, have you ever had to fire an employee? Give me some idea of what your experience has been. We'll go to the results here. Again, a large number of you have, and I would suspect that even the ones that haven't ever had to fire may have had some opportunity to contribute to that decision. It is certainly, it's a difficult time. I have fired a number of people in my career, and I participate with some of my clients now, and it is fraught with problems. You usually don't want to do it. There are certainly some potential legal ramifications that go along with that, and so you as a supervisor, the manager, are trying to be on your best behavior. So let's take a look at our next scenario here, and we've got Michelle. Going back to our first scenario where things are continuing to get worse. She's not addressing her performance issues. She promised to make an effort, and she's not making that effort. Things got better for a little bit, but it didn't last. She's still making those mistakes. She's falling short on her job responsibilities, and now it's time for you to do something about it. You've counseled with her, you gave her a written warning, and that didn't help. She continues to get sloppier, and it's causing bottlenecks for other people. Critical projects are becoming at risk, and so is it time to consider termination? Yes, but you need to make sure that you're going through progressive discipline as a best practice. Most organizations will stay out of trouble if they have addressed progressive discipline as a result. So in this particular case, our employee has received a verbal warning for her first offense. She got a written warning on the fact that her expectations were not being met within the time frame that had been set out, and final warning, and now we're looking at potentially termination. It is unlikely by the time you get to this time that people are going to have a 180-degree turnaround. If you have gone this far and they have not heeded the warnings, then termination is pretty much a foregone conclusion. Again, a reminder of the importance of documentation. It is, if you don't document, you are going to lose. I will tell you that right now. In a union situation, an unemployment situation, in a court trial, you do not have the documentation, you are going to lose. Whether you are justified or whether you are correct or not, it is going to, you're not going to win. So document. It helps you going through the resolution. It helps you justify the termination. Even when you have hours and hours and hours, or days and months or years where you now have a lawsuit that you're dealing with, you're not going to remember that stuff. So you need to have job evaluations, the warnings, your notes, and examples of poor performance that will help you prove to somebody that this termination was justified. Some of the essential components of a good write-up is the fact that, number one, the facts. Be detailed on what occurred and when it occurred. Talk about what policy, if that's applicable, what was violated, such as your attendance policy or your safety policy or rules about personal phone use, those kinds of things. Set out what the expectations for improvement were. and what the time frame was on that. Set out what you, the company, did or were willing to do, such as training and coaching, going on, that extra step to make sure that that person had the opportunity to do what they were supposed to do. Make sure that you have explained to them the consequences of termination. I know I have talked to supervisors a number of times. Have you told this person they weren't supposed to do this? And then you talk to the employee and they say, well, the supervisor mentioned that I needed to improve. Well, that's not the same as saying that you need to do that or you're going to get fired. And as much as possible, you need signatures on documents. When it's actually time to let people go, you can get caught up on things. You're affecting somebody's life. It's not an easy decision to make, but it is your right to do it. And there's no law that requires you to have a poor performing employee in your workplace. It is also your duty, not only to the company and your fellow employees, but in my opinion, to the person that is doing the poor job. You've communicated the expectations. You've provided a fair and reasonable opportunity to improve. You have documented those issues, and you have evidence that you can show that other people have been treated similar in other situations. When you're sitting down with this person, where you're having to sit with them, you want to have a witness. You want to be clear and straightforward. You're not going to. This is not the time to have that conversation. This is, you're getting to the nitty-gritty. You're going to be terminated, and often that's going to be immediately. You're going to talk specifically about what they did and the steps that you went through. You're going to stay focused on that. Do not let this employee get you off on a tangent. You can be respectful and show sympathy, but I would actually say raise sympathy and show that respect. Don't soften the blow by telling them how great they were, because now all you're going to do is confuse the issue. And then try not to show emotion if you can, but it's difficult. I will tell you and admit to you that the first person that I ever fired was sitting there bawling in front of my desk, and I was crying behind my desk. So it's not easy, particularly if you don't have any experience in doing it. After a while, you get a little toughened about doing it. We always talk about having the employee sign the termination document. That's always good, and hopefully if things have gone well, they'll go ahead and do that. But sometimes they refuse, and in that particular case, you have the witness sign that the employee refused, but they didn't get all of the information that they needed to have. You can do a couple things. You can get them to gather up their personal belongings and leave. You usually want to do that at the end of the day. But you don't necessarily need to do that. Sometimes you want to avoid the perp walk, as it's been called. Dead employee walking. If I had one employee tell me one time, is you may want to avoid that. So you want to arrange for them to be able to come back and get stuff or have it mailed to them. Whatever is going to be least embarrassing for them. Make sure that you've worked with your IT group and that you shut off all access of IT and passes and emails and those kinds of things, and collect whatever property that they have. And in many cases, that may require company credit cards and those kinds of things. So a final thought is you've got to be respectful in doing this, because employees can give you a bad name. There are rating sites where they can go out and rate about how well you have done or how badly you have done. And you want to make sure that after everybody walking out of that, at least they understand why they were terminated. They don't feel that it was personal, that it was actually related to their performance, and as a result of that, they will go away and not slam you in the press. So with that, Stephanie, we'll open it back. We'll open it up for some questions if we have some, and we'll go from there.
Yep. Thank you, Mike. I did want to thank everyone for being on the webinar for the full hour today. We will run a few minutes over because we're going to just address one or two questions if you want to just answer one or two, Mike. And I'll let you take it over from here.
Well, let's see here. Questions. We got 11 of those. All right, the first one is, what if you've been told about a behavior issue in confidence with no way you could have known unless you give away the confidence of the employee who told you? Well, let me tell you, in human resources, there is no such thing as confidence. And actually, as a management employee for the company, there really should be no such thing as confidence if what they have told you is effective, is illegal. So if somebody is reporting that they have seen sexual harassment, or somebody is showing that they have seen discrimination, or somebody is showing, telling you that they have seen, misdealings of funds and those kinds of things, then you have to tell that person, particularly if you're in human resources, I will try to maintain this as much as possible, but the information you have given me is something that I, as a company manager, have the right to, or the obligation to act on, and so we will try to keep this as quiet as possible, but you've given me information that we need to go on, work on. So people cannot ask you, they cannot come and say, hey, I want to tell you this, but I don't want you to do anything about it. You have an obligation as a manager to the company to do something about it. All right, next question is, what if they do not accept criticism well, the person who always feels the victim? Well, if you've done what you can do to deliver it as respectfully as possible, that's, I hate to say it, but it's their problem. How they accept that critique is their problem. It is best to present it as a critique. It's best to present it as you are trying to help them improve. If they want to take it as criticism, then that's their choice. I don't know how well I answered that, but it gets down to sometimes it's them and not you. Next question is, if an employee has not worked for the whole year, should they still be given an annual review? Well, one of the things is the fact that the way the world is moving right now is a lot of companies are getting rid of just that 1 year event. They are moving toward more frequent events, and the 1 year just is sort of the culmination of that. If you're a manager and a supervisor, you actually should be reviewing your employees all the time, whether it's in just one short sentence every week, or if it is just once a month, once a quarter. You can do many reviews. You should never lose contact with your employee. You should always have an understanding of where they are on their goals and what they're trying to do. That is your job as a supervisor or manager. Unfortunately, here in American business, we quite often give that supervisor and their manager their own individual responsibilities that they have to accomplish, and they lose sight of the fact that supervisor and manager are in their title, and that should be their primary duty. So it is, I would, to answer the question, yes, at the end of the year when you're doing other people's reviews, I would do their review as well, just so they understand and now they're on the same track as other people are. We have another question here. It says, is it realistic to expect all employees to be engaged 100% of the time? No, it's not ever going to happen, because engagement is not necessarily an external that you can force on the employee. Engagement is an internal feeling. And there are going to be days somebody's going to wake up and they're going to feel crappy, or they've got stuff going on in life and they just don't want to be at work. They're not going to be engaged in that job. So it's unrealistic to expect that people are going to be there 100% on all the time. But it is, you certainly want those numbers to be 85 or 90%. You want people to be happy doing what they're doing. All right, let's see. What do you do with your newest employee who has been there 1 year, 5 months, and goes directly to the boss every 3 months and asks for a raise? Well, yeah, those are issues that are being caused by a new generation of employees who have differing expectations of what the work is, so part of it is you sit down and you explain to them, what the chain of command is and what the expectations are, and they're not necessarily always going to listen to that. And the person that's going every 3 months and asks for a raise, the boss should be saying to them, you need to talk to your manager or your supervisor and say, have you talked to your boss? What are the goals? What have you accomplished? And that's the kind of thing that your supervisor should be bringing to me. So with that. You want to do one more, Stephanie?
We can do one more.
Okay. Next one says, this is alarming when an HR person feels disengaged in the company. This tells me the company is in a crisis. Just thinking, how can you help them to get back engaged in their company? Well, just as you would do that with any employee, is find out why they're disengaged. Are they disengaged because of the work, or are they disengaged because of something that's going on in their life? Are they bored with what they're doing? Well, then maybe the assignment needs to change. If you've been doing the same thing for 20 years, it's very likely you're probably not going to be engaged with it as well today as you were, that 20 years ago. And so as a result of that, they need to revisit. They need to find out also why they are not engaged. And perhaps they need to change their circumstances. They need to go to a different job, a different company, or it could be that their job description hasn't changed in forever, and then maybe the boss can do something to add some additional duties, add some additional challenges, put them in charge of some projects, those kinds of things that can help bring them back into engagement level. So. And with that, I think that's probably the questions we can cover. We'll try to cover some questions in a different format, perhaps, but hopefully we'll try to get to some of these other questions at a later time. Stephanie, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, that is all the time we have for questions in this 1-hour webinar, but stay tuned in your follow-up email. Mike will have a chance to answer some more questions, and we'll share the link to that. So that will be in your follow-up email, and that will come from HR Direct this week. Thank you all again for participating in the chat. And before we sign off today, I just would like to invite you to next month's webinar by Comply Right, which will be on June 14th at 2 p.m. And the webinar is Independent Contractor or Employee, How to Get It Right Every Time and Protect Your Business from Devastating Penalties. Does your business rely on freelancers, project workers, and other independent contractors to get things done? Using contract workers has many benefits, but it can be fraught with risk. The IRS has strict rules that define who can be treated as a contractor and who should be considered an employee. The penalties for getting it wrong can be crippling, so this free webinar will provide the clarity you need to make sure you don't accidentally cross the line when working with freelancers, consultants, temps, and other contract workers. You'll walk away with the knowledge you need to protect yourself from a costly mistake. You can sign up for this webinar starting tomorrow on complyright.com. This was an informative session today, and I thank you all for staying on with us during the hour. Thank you, Mike, for presenting, and everyone have a great day.